I knew something was wrong the second I walked into the ballroom. The chandeliers were dripping with gold light, the kind of expensive glow that hides the cracks in everything underneath. White linens, overpriced floral arrangements, champagne flowing like it was water. It was supposed to be a celebration of our company's success. My success. 11 years of building the analytics division into something real, profitable and respected. But as I stood there in my black dress, clutching a glass of bubbly that tasted faintly of regret, I felt the atmosphere shift. Too many eyes on me. Too many whispers curling around the room like smoke. And then, like the villain in a bad corporate fairy tale, our CEO, Richard Calloway, strutted onto the stage. Richard loved a spotlight. He loved nothing more than hearing his own voice echo through expensive speakers while people nodded like disciples. Tonight, he had gone all out. A branded stage backdrop, a live band playing Coldplay covers, and fog machines. Yes, fog machines at a corporate gala. Because nothing says integrity like artificial mist. He raised his glass, his teeth so white they practically glowed in the dim light. Tonight, he began, we celebrate not just our numbers but our transformation. A new era of efficiency, a bold new chapter I should have known then. Efficiency. That word always hides the knife. And then it came. He paused, smirked, and pointed toward me. Starting with her termination. For a second, the room froze. Then, like some sick cue, laughter rippled through the audience. Executives chuckled, VPs smirked, and even a few of my peers, the ones I trained, clapped. My badge deactivated instantly, the silent confirmation of my execution. I bit my tongue so hard I could taste iron. My nails dug crescents into my palm. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to scream. I stood there as if carved from stone while he moved on, already talking about innovation pipelines and agile synergies, like I had never even existed. The humiliation burned, but the betrayal? That cut deeper. I'd given over a decade to this company. Late nights, weekends, holidays sacrificed to keep this place afloat. And this was how they erased me. Publicly, cruelly, efficiently. And then, my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was another automated HR notification. Maybe an email confirming my health insurance was gone. But when I glanced down at the screen, my breath caught. It was a text. From a number I knew. Marcus Hale, the top investor in the company. A man who rarely even acknowledged my presence unless it was about quarterly reports. The message was short, precise. Are you free? Let's end his career. For the first time that evening, I almost smiled. I didn't leave immediately. I let the humiliation play out. Let Richard enjoy his little performance. But inside, something was shifting. The numbness cracked, replaced by something sharper. Purpose. I slipped out of the ballroom just as the fog machines hissed again, my heels echoing against marble. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap. Cold, clean, grounding. My carry-on bag felt heavier than usual, though I hadn't even packed it. When you've been betrayed like that, in front of peers and strangers alike, something inside you hardens. You stop caring about decorum. You stop caring about survival mode. What's left is focus. I leaned against a stone pillar, pulled out my phone again, and stared at Marcus's message. End his career. I thought about Richard's smirk, about the way people clapped when I was dismissed like a line item in a spreadsheet, about Jenny, my assistant, who had been crying quietly behind her champagne glass, about the years of building something real, only to be discarded in the name of efficiency. And I thought, maybe it's time someone taught Richard what efficiency really looks like. I typed back 2 words. I'm in. Within minutes, Marcus's assistant sent me an address. Not a boardroom, not a fancy restaurant, but a quiet townhouse 3 blocks away from the Gala. Marcus never wasted time. If he wanted me there, it meant something big. I didn't look back at the ballroom. Didn't glance at the lights, the music, The people who had just erased me. Let them toast their new era. They had no idea the storm that was already brewing. As I walked toward that townhouse, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Jenny. I'm with you. Always I stopped in my tracks. Jenny had been by my side for 5 years, loyal, precise, the kind of assistant who noticed everything. If she was still in, if she was willing to take the risk, then maybe I wasn't as alone as Richard wanted me to believe. I pocketed the phone and kept walking. The night smelled faintly of rain and smoke. The city hummed with its usual indifference. But inside me, the fire was just beginning to catch. Richard thought he had humiliated me into silence. He thought I'd fade into the background, another casualty of corporate realignment. But he had underestimated me. Because efficiency, real efficiency, is burning down a liar's empire with nothing but receipts and precision. And by the time I reached Marcus Hale's door, I already knew. Richard had just fired the wrong woman. Marcus Hale did not look like the kind of man who sent nuclear texts. He opened the townhouse door in a navy sweater and reading glasses, like a professor grading papers on a Sunday. No entourage, no security, just a single lamp on and a kettle steaming in the kitchen. I stepped inside, closed the door, and waited for the performance. There wasn't one. I'm sorry you were humiliated, he said. No theatrics, no handshake. Sit. I sat. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. He poured tea, not whiskey. It felt deliberate, like he was setting the tone. Calm, slow, controlled. You know why you're here, he said. Because you sent a text that sounds like a felony. His mouth twitched. Because he lied to a room I pay for? I didn't answer. The humiliation from the gala still clung to me like smoke. Marcus set 2 folders on the coffee table. I'm not asking you to steal corporate property or hack anything, he said. We'll do this clean. Legal. You will not access systems you no longer have rights to. You will not ask anyone to break policy. You will not record anyone without consent in a one-party state. You're giving the rules speech, I said. I'm giving you cover, he replied. If this goes forward, it will end in auditors and regulators. We don't feed them tainted fruit. He opened the first folder, printed screenshots, not originals. Analyst notes, public filings, earnings call transcripts lined with yellow highlights. On the last page, a press photo of Richard standing in front of a slide labeled Novaline, Q to launch. I sat on the prototype committee, I said. There is no Q2 launch. I know, he said, but he told the street there is. He's been promising a product he can't ship to preserve a multiple he doesn't deserve. You were the last person in leadership who would say that out loud. There it was, plain English, not a vendetta, evaluation. You want me to blow the whistle, I said. I want the truth, he said. And I want it in a format that stands up in a room full of lawyers. I looked at the second folder. It was empty. That one is yours, he said. Populate it with what you remember. Timelines, meetings, who was in the room when deadlines moved, any roadblocks you documented. Memory is admissible when it's annotated and corroborated. You were there. That matters. I don't have access anymore. I'm not asking for access, he said. I'm asking for a reconstruction. People forget that paper trails aren't just PDFs. They're calendars, slide templates, stand-up notes, vendor RFPs, procurement approvals, even travel itineraries. All of that can be requested later, if you flag what to look for. He slid over a legal card. If you proceed, you'll speak only through counsel. Attorney-client privilege applies from now. He paused. And Anna, don't text me about this again. Use the number on the card. Landline. Calls only Jenny, I said before I could stop myself. My assistant. She's still inside. She'll help, within policy. He nodded like he already knew. Then tell her to protect herself. No printing, no forwarding, no screenshots. She can keep a contemporaneous journal, dates and who told her what. That's legal. That's powerful. I studied him. Why me? Because you built what he's selling, he said, and because you're angry enough to do it right. I didn't trust that compliment, but I understood it. We laid out a plan that felt like a grocery list written in lawyer ink. I would draft a timeline from memory. Product milestones, revenue claims tied to Novaline, slips where Pilot was rebranded as Launch. Marcus's analysts would parallel it against public guidance. We'd identify individuals to interview later. Engineering managers who killed features, sales leaders who lost accounts, finance staff who reclassified churn. If something smelled off, it would go on a list for subpoenas, not Slack DMs. 3 weeks, Marcus said. That's what I think he has before he tries to push a deal. If this is real, we need to be ready before he hands a bomb to someone else. 3 weeks is not a lot of time, I said. It's enough to be credible, he answered. Credibility moves faster than spin. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. Leave the folder. Pick it up tomorrow at the coffee shop on 53rd at 10. Ask for newspaper. Cute, I said. Old, he corrected. I stepped back into the night feeling oddly sober. Not righteous, careful. This wasn't a movie. This was a process, and processes don't clap when you make the right choice. They ask for proof. Jenny called me as I turned the corner. Where are you? She whispered. Walking, I said. Listen. From now on, nothing digital that you wouldn't want read aloud in a deposition. If you see something, write it down in a paper notebook. Dates, times. Who said what? Old school, she asked. Admissible, I said. She exhaled. They're rewriting the Novaline roadmap, she said. Marketing updated the internal wiki to say launch window. Engineering still has no QA builds, and Richard scheduled a town hall for Monday topic. Our path to efficiency, she said, and I could hear the eye roll. Anna, are we really doing this? We're documenting, I said, and we're protecting you. I went home, pulled the second folder onto my kitchen table, and started drawing a line down a page. What was promised on the left, what existed on the right. My handwriting was slow at first, then faster as the dates kicked loose. March, prototype freeze missed. April, sales demo was a Figma mock. May, finance removed experimental tag from Novaline revenue and called it expansion. I remembered the meeting. Richard had framed it as aligning with market perception. I wrote the phrase exactly as he said it because words are fingerprints. At 1:13 a.m., I stopped and read the page. It didn't look like revenge. It looked like work I'd been doing for years. Clearing fog, naming things. The quiet kind of courage no one applauds. I tucked the notes into the empty folder and sealed it with a strip of tape I found in a junk drawer. Before bed, I texted Jenny one sentence. Paper only. You're not alone. As I turned off the light, a thought surfaced that I didn't push away. Richard had called my termination an era of efficiency. He wasn't wrong. Efficiency is doing the next necessary thing without flinching. In the morning, I would start asking questions the right way. And if the answers pointed where I thought they would, we wouldn't need theatrics or fog machines. We'd have the truth. And a clock. I arrived at the coffee shop on 53rd exactly at 10. The place smelled like burnt espresso and impatience. A barista with a nose ring glanced up when I ordered and handed me a small brown bag. Inside, beneath a muffin I didn't order, was the folder I'd left at Marcus's townhouse. My notes were still there, but now they were typed, formatted, and cross-referenced against public statements. His analysts had wasted no time. Next to each milestone I had listed, prototype freeze, demo dates, revenue classifications, there were highlights in red. Inconsistent with public guidance. Contradicted by earnings call. No supporting documentation filed with SEC. They were building the skeleton of a case. All I had to do was keep giving them bones. That night, I met Jenny in a strip mall diner 2 towns over. She wore a baseball cap pulled low, her hair tucked away like she was in witness protection. She ordered chamomile tea but didn't drink it. "They're scrubbing mentions of Novaline," she said. "Internal wiki, project trackers, even Slack channels. Threads are disappearing mid-scroll. It's like someone is airbrushing history while we watch." "Dates?" I asked. "Yesterday afternoon, right after the gala, I wrote it down in my notebook. Day after termination, records scrubbed." Jenny leaned closer. "It's not just deletions. They're moving credits, too. I saw your name taken off 3 milestone reviews, replaced with corporate co-author." My jaw tightened. Erasure wasn't new in business, but seeing it happen in real time was different. "Back it up," I said. I did. Flash drive, she slid a small black stick across the table like contraband. "Encrypted." Triple-checked, I tucked it into my bag without looking. Evidence wasn't dramatic. It was tedious, careful, boring, and that's why it mattered. Over the next week, my days became a cycle of calls and notes. I reached out to people I hadn't spoken to in years, former colleagues who had left suddenly or quietly. Some hung up, some ignored me, but a few answered. Rita, a product lead, laughed bitterly when I asked about her departure. They told me I couldn't adapt to the agile vision. Translation, I questioned why we were promising features we hadn't even scoped. Evan, an analyst, said HR had found inconsistencies in his code after he refused to massage the forecast. "One day I was a rising star," he said. "Next day I was escorted out with a box." Funny thing, my forecast turned out to be right. Too right. Patterns emerged, the same words repeated like a script. Misalignment, redundancy, not culture fit. Euphemisms for dissent. By the 5th call, I had a page full of phrases that weren't just stories. They were evidence of a culture. A culture where questioning the fantasy meant you vanished. Jenny kept feeding me small pieces. An old budget draft that showed experimental revenue relabeled as growth. Meeting invites for product demos that never happened. One night she called, her voice shaking. "They caught me printing," she whispered. "Caught how?" "The system logs every job. I told them it was a duplicate of HR tax forms. They let it slide, but someone's watching." I closed my eyes, felt the heat behind them. "No more printing," I said. "Paper only from memory. Notes you can defend. No trails they can twist." She hesitated. "Anna, if they find out..." "They won't," I said. "Because we're not stealing. We're documenting silence." "Then, okay. But I'm scared." "So am I admitted. "That's why we're careful." The next day, Marcus called. His tone was as calm as always, but I could hear the undercurrent of urgency. "We've matched your notes against 2/4 of filings. The discrepancies are significant. Enough for questions, maybe subpoenas." "Significant isn't enough," I said. "It has to be undeniable." "Then keep going," he said. "The deeper he digs to cover himself, the easier he'll be to bury." That night, I opened Jenny's flash drive on my old Dell laptop. The screen flickered like a smoker's cough, but the files opened. Spreadsheets, draft presentations, metadata showing edits after midnight. My name stamped on documents I hadn't touched. I stared at the screen, a slow rage crawling up my throat. This wasn't just betrayal. This was identity theft. My reputation used as camouflage for lies. At 2:14 a.m., I picked up my notebook and wrote in block letters. "This is fraud." I didn't feel triumph. I felt cold, steady. The kind of clarity you only get when there's no way back. I called Marcus in the morning. He answered on the first ring. "I'm in," I said. "And he's dumber than I thought." "Good," Marcus replied. "Then it's time to start collecting kindling." For the first time in days, I almost smiled, because Richard thought efficiency meant cutting people like me. But I was about to show him a different kind of efficiency, the kind that dismantles an empire piece by piece until all that's left is smoke. By the second week, the pattern wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a map. Every falsified milestone, every inflated projection, every erased credit pointed in one direction. Richard. He wasn't just exaggerating. He was building a castle on sand and selling tickets for the tour. Marcus called me one night while I was sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks. "He's pitching investors," he said. "Not the board. Outsiders. Rumors say he's trying to package Novaline as proof of growth before a sale." "How soon?" 3 weeks, maybe less. 3 weeks. That was our deadline. The idea of Richard walking away with a golden parachute while employees got gutted in a merger made my stomach turn. If we wanted to stop him, we needed more than whispers and patterns. We needed a confession, or something close enough to look like one. That's when Marcus laid out the trap. "We'll bait him with validation," he said. "A fake investor, a clean front. You join as consultant. He won't be able to resist bragging about Novaline to outsiders." It sounded insane, risky, but realistic. Richard thrived on admiration. If someone waved the promise of money and prestige, he'd talk himself into a corner. 2 days later, Verdant Axis existed. On paper, it was a boutique analytics investment firm with sustainable branding, a Delaware filing, and a LinkedIn page polished enough to fool anyone skimming fast. They even hired a compliance expert to script the meeting invites, and I was listed as business development consultant. Subtle, forgettable. Jenny helped with the cover. She borrowed a ring light from her cousin so I could look polished on Zoom, and she mocked up a fake background that looked like a WeWork in Tribeca. Plants, exposed brick, the whole thing. The call was set for Tuesday at 2 p.m. I didn't sleep the night before. When Richard's face appeared on the screen, I kept mine neutral. Professional, distant. He didn't recognize me. Or maybe he refused to. Men like him convince themselves their enemies disappear once they're out of sight. He launched into his pitch immediately. "We're seeing over 60% growth quarter over quarter in our new vertical," he bragged. "Novaline is driving interest in Tier 2 markets, reducing churn, and creating substantial engagement." I let him go. He spoke like a man in love with his own slides, confident, smug, detached from reality. He name-dropped Fortune 500 clients under NDA, hinted at partnerships that never existed, and described APIS as active when engineering hadn't even assigned a single ticket. It was everything we needed, and every word was being recorded. When the call ended, my hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, just focus. It wasn't personal anymore. It was arithmetic, a fraud equation solving itself. I forwarded the recording to Marcus with one word: done. 5 minutes later, he called back. "We've got him. SEC grade evidence. If we drop this at the right moment, he doesn't just lose his job. He loses everything." "Not yet," I said. There was a pause. "Why not?" "Because he's still running," I said. "And I want him to trip before we pull the rug." Marcus chuckled, low and sharp. "Fair enough." That night, Jenny called in a panic. They're shredding paper on the 4th floor, whole carts of documents, and someone flagged my badge for audit. They know something's leaking. I gripped the phone tighter. "Jenny, listen to me. You're done. No more risks. Stay clean. They'll sniff around, but they won't find anything. You've done enough." Her voice cracked. "But we don't have everything yet." "We have enough," I said firmly. "And I need you safe." There was silence, then a shaky exhale. "Okay." After we hung up, I stared at my laptop. The recording sat there like a loaded weapon, neat and undeniable. But Marcus was right. Timing mattered. If we moved too soon, Richard would spin it. If we waited, he'd hang himself with his own rope. 2 weeks left. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window, looking at the city lights. For years, I'd believed in the work. Believed that numbers told the truth if you measured them right. Now I knew better. Numbers could lie. People could weaponize them. But people could also use them to expose the lie. Efficiency. Richard had turned the word into a weapon against me. But as I sat there, calm and clear, I realized what efficiency really was. Not fog machines, not slogans, not public firings. Efficiency was this: gathering the right pieces, building the case, and waiting for the exact second to strike. And when that second came, Richard Calloway wouldn't just fall. He'd collapse under the weight of his own invention. The call came on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks after the sting. Marcus didn't waste words. 6 p.m. emergency session. Counsel present. Bring your timeline. Assume nothing you say is off the record. Is Richard invited? He's leading it, Marcus said. For now. I arrived early with 2 binders and a notebook. No drama, no hero's entrance, just a woman who'd done her homework. The boardroom was colder than it needed to be. Walnut table, bottled water lined like soldiers. Outside the glass, New York did what it always does. Kept moving. Richard came in wearing a suit the color of denial. He nodded at me like we were still colleagues and not on opposite sides of a fault line. He opened with charm. He always did. Let's not lose the plot because of one anonymous tape, he said, smiling tight. We're executing. Novaline is in development. Any language that sounds aggressive was investor enthusiasm. Marcus didn't look at him. He looked at counsel, who pressed a button on a small speaker. My careful voice asked, how soon could an investor leverage Novaline's data pipelines? Richard's answer filled the room. Confident, specific, indefensible. A PIS active growth. North of 60%. Partners under NDA. Lies that sounded like leadership. I didn't watch Richard's face. I watched the board. Blink, blink, then stillness. Elaine, the director who never wasted a breath, folded her hands. Anna, she said, walk us through the timeline. I did. No speeches, no adjectives, just dates, meetings, phrases repeated word for word. Prototype freeze missed. Sales demo was a mock. Experimental revenue relabeled as expansion. Credits reassigned after my termination. I cited who was in the room and who could corroborate. When I finished, I slid the second binder forward. The crosswalk Marcus's analysts had built against public statements. Counsel spoke next. We recommend a legal hold across all systems immediately. Email, Slack, shared drives. No data deletion, no device wipes, no travel beyond normal course. Mr. Calloway, you will surrender your laptop and phone at the end of this meeting. Richard laughed. It didn't land. This is ridiculous. It's routine, counsel said. And necessary. The board voted, not termination, not yet. They placed him on administrative leave, effective immediately, and appointed an independent firm to begin a forensic review over the weekend. HR would notify the company in the morning. No fog machines, no band, just a motion, a second, and a unanimous show of hands. Outside the building, the air felt different. Thin, truthful. Jenny texted me a single emoji. A flame, then a stop sign. We lit it. Now hold the line. Friday was quiet in the loud way crisis is. IT locked accounts. A firm with a name like a law office installed e-discovery tools. Finance put the experimental label back where it belonged. Legal sent out a memo. Preserve everything. No one said my name out loud, but people knew. I bought a cheap sandwich and ate half of it. My stomach was busy. On Monday morning, an 8K hit the wire. CEO on leave pending investigation. Board cooperating with regulators. Guidance under review. The stock dipped, then steadied. Not confidence, exactly, but caution. Richard scheduled a personal statement at a co-working space with brick walls and moral support. It lasted 7 minutes. Reporters asked what active APIs meant if engineering had no tickets. He blamed timelines in flux. He left with his tie in his pocket. Inside the company, people did what people do in uncertainty. They clung to the nearest adult. Teams pinged managers for direction. HR put together talking points with the emotional range of a toaster. Jenny sent me a photo of a whiteboard in a conference room. No more slides until we have something to demo. Underneath, someone wrote, Amen. Tuesday night, the board reconvened. The independent firm presented preliminary findings: revenue reclassification without adequate disclosure, deck edits that overstated pipeline, internal objections documented and overridden. My name was on some of those objections. So were others who'd left. It wasn't a single mistake. It was a pattern. Counsel cleared her throat. We have sufficient grounds for termination for cause. The room went very quiet. Marcus didn't look triumphant. He looked tired. Elaine spoke last. Mr. Calloway, this is the end of your employment. Effective immediately. For cause. No severance. Your equity is subject to clawback pending final findings. Security will escort you out after you sign the acknowledgement. He didn't make a scene. He didn't beg. He just nodded like a man who could finally hear the click of a door he'd been closing on himself for months. He left. The board turned to me. We need a grown-up to stabilize the floor, Elaine said. 75 days, chief restructuring officer, limited mandate, transparency, guardrails, retention. After that, a proper search. It wasn't victory. It was a job. I took it. The next morning, I stood in front of a room that used to scare me and told the truth. No music, no fog. There's no Novaline launch next quarter, I said. We're not going to pretend otherwise. We're going to fix what's real and stop selling what isn't. If you have receipts, good or bad, bring them. No one gets punished for telling the truth. I restored credits on 3 projects, including my own, then added names that had been erased before mine. We issued retention grants to engineers and analysts who'd been asked to do magic tricks with numbers. I met with finance and told them clarity beats optimism. I met with legal and told them cooperation beats posture. I met with Jenny and told her she could sleep. When she cried, it wasn't dramatic. It was relief leaving the body. By week 3, the building felt different. Not fixed, just honest. The board hired an external CEO with a boring resume and a spine. I handed over the keys with a clean inbox and a list of things that still needed saying out loud. They offered me a permanent role. I said no. I didn't want a throne. I wanted my life back. Before I left, Jenny brought me one last envelope. A stack of old patent filings with the right names in the right places. Mine included. They were filed, she said. He tried to strip them. He didn't get to finish. I walked out of the building into air that didn't taste like smoke anymore. The city went on, indifferent and honest. I thought about the word that started all of this. Efficiency. Richard wielded it like a weapon. But efficiency without integrity is just speed toward a cliff. The shortest path to the truth is still the straight line. Dates, facts, names, receipts. If you've ever been erased, write it down. If you've ever been told to make the numbers sing, ask who's picking the song. And if someone fires you for telling the truth, remember there's a clean way to write yourself back in. I didn't get revenge. I got the record corrected. And sometimes that's the louder ending. The room smelled like old wood and expensive coffee, the kind you serve to make bad news feel civilized. The chairman cleared his throat, eyes skimming past me as if contact might contaminate him. We've unanimously decided that you're terminated. Security will escort you out immediately. Across the table, 2 colleagues smirked, already picturing my empty chair. I stood, thanked them for the clarity, and closed my notebook with the kind of calm that makes people nervous. They hadn't read the contract I signed 5 years ago. Or maybe they had and didn't understand it, which was worse. I walked the length of the glass hallway, my heels steady on the marble. No tears, no speech, no scene. In the elevator, the city's skyline slid past like a quiet endorsement. I caught my reflection and the corners of my mouth lifted. Monday would be fun. Back at my desk, I moved like I was packing for a quiet vacation. Photo of my mother, the fountain pen she gave me when I won my first client. A little ceramic fox my niece insisted was my focus animal. I left the company laptop like a molted shell. A junior associate watched me the way people watch a controlled burn, fascinated and a little afraid. "Good luck, Alice," he whispered. I didn't need luck. I had paragraphs. Paragraph 14C, to be exact. The key stewardship writer. I had insisted on it during the merger, when the new leadership wanted my book of business but not my voice. I gave them a smile and a choice. If you want my accounts, you protect my clients. We wrote it into the master service agreements and mirrored it in my employment contract. Changes to assigned account steward require the written consent of the steward of record for the duration of each active term. No transfer, no upsell, no renewal, no access without my signature. Not a ceremonial clause, an operational choke point. They got the revenue, I kept the keys. Most people read contracts like weather, vaguely and with a shrug. I read them like maps. That day, 5 years ago, legal rolled their eyes, finance muttered about process friction, and the chairman, yes, the same man, signed with a little laugh. "If it keeps you happy, Alice." He never asked why it would keep me safe. Outside, the air had the metallic bite of impending rain. I balanced the box against my hip and called Priya, my attorney, who speaks the language of leverage the way musicians hear chords. "It happened," I said. "Board vote. Security and everything she didn't waste sympathy on performance." "Do you have the writer copies in the MSA schedule?" "In the safe and on a drive." "Then breathe. Don't wave papers yet. Let them move first. Document every step. We'll be polite right up until we're final. Polite right up until we're final." It sounded like a motto. At home, I set the box down and poured tea. The way my mother taught me to mark endings and beginnings with heat and patience. I thought about Tom, my ex-husband who'd told me over takeout and a drifting marriage that I didn't have the stomach for boardrooms. He left with the dining table and the television. I kept the contracts. People divide up what they value most. I opened the folder labeled Writer Stewardship and ran my finger down the signatures. Not just mine, clients. Their names like anchor points across my career. Hospitals that trusted us with compliance, manufacturers with razor-thin margins, a nonprofit that couldn't afford a stumble. I wasn't sentimental about corporations, but I was devout about promises. That was the message beneath the legalese. I don't abandon people so a forecast looks prettier. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. "Tough break. You okay?" "Heard about the vote." One from Karen, always the opportunist. "If you need referrals, I know a place hiring." I smiled at the ceiling. The thing about being underestimated is that it buys you time. They throw a party for your exit while you set the table for your return. I spent the evening making lists, the kind that calm my pulse. Inventory, all active MSAs, with Writer 14C attachment. Confirm renewal windows and notice periods. Draft courteous letters to clients. Stewardship continuity. Service stability. No changes without my consent. Schedule calls with 3 largest accounts. Ask for 5 minutes. Take 15. Leave with written confirmations. Prepare a memo to the board. Observe the writer or face material breach. No threats. No flame. Just paper and patience. I thought about the day I negotiated the writer. Back then, I still wore my wedding ring. Tom rolled it between his fingers like a coin and said, "Why make things harder?" Because one day I knew someone would make me disposable. Not the clients. The people who existed to be congratulated for making decisions others would have to clean up. Thunder rumbled somewhere distant. I pictured the boardroom, the way the chairman's mouth pinched when he said unanimous, as if consensus were virtue and not convenience. I imagine my colleagues at the after-work bar telling the story of how Alice took it so well, how she finally ran out of allies. They would forget that allies aren't always in the room. Sometimes they're in the footer of a contract in the inbox of a client who remembers who showed up on weekends. A text from my mother pinged. 3 words that land like a hand on the shoulder. Proud of you. She didn't ask for details. She trusted my compass. I looked out at the wet shine of the streetlights. Power, I've learned, isn't volume. It's continuity. Show up, do the work, leave a trail of signed truths. The board had chosen spectacle. I would choose sequence. Before bed, I printed the letters on thick paper. No drama, just clarity. As steward of record under Rider 14C, I will continue to authorize all account changes. There will be no disruption to your service. If anyone requests access or proposes a change, please direct them to me for written consent. I sealed the envelopes and placed them by the door like small, patient soldiers. I slept deeply. Anticipation can be loud, but reassurance is heavier. In the morning, I'd drop the letters, then walk to the small office I rented 2 blocks from the river. A room with light, a whiteboard, a lock. Not an empire, a position. They will try to move quickly, Priya had said. Let them. Speed without authority is just wind. And me? I had the keys. Monday would be fun. Monday morning arrived with a drizzle that glossed the sidewalks and made the city look like it had been polished overnight. I carried the envelopes in my tote bag. Their weight not physical, but deliberate. Each one was addressed to a client, each one a reminder that their trust was still tethered to me, not to the board that thought they had erased me with a vote. I walked into the post office just as the doors opened, the smell of ink and damp paper filling the air. One by one, I slid the envelopes across the counter. The clerk stamped them with a steady rhythm, and with each heavy thump of the seal, I felt the ground under my feet steady. By the time the last envelope disappeared into the bin, I knew the board's timeline had already been hijacked. They could plan whatever power plays they wanted. None of it would stick without my signature. Back at my apartment, I brewed coffee and opened my laptop. A flood of messages waited. Some from old colleagues pretending to care. Others from people who had ignored me for years but suddenly found their curiosity awakened. But buried among them were the messages that mattered. Client replies. Thank you for the update, Alice. We prefer continuity, especially with you. Please confirm you'll remain our steward of record. We value your oversight. Board has contacted us about streamlining. We declined until we hear from you. Each message was oxygen. I typed back with measured calm. Yes, I remain the steward of record. No changes are authorized without my consent. No anger, no boasting, just quiet reinforcement. By mid-morning, Priya called. The first wave will hit today, she said. They'll contact clients, maybe try to access renewal portals. We've drafted a cease and desist template. Do nothing unless they overstep, then we drop it like a hammer. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the sharpness beneath it, the kind of edge honed by years of watching arrogance collapse under paperwork. Clients are already writing back, I said. Good, she replied. Every reply is a nail in their coffin. Keep copies. I saved each confirmation in a folder labeled continuity. Watching it grow was like stacking bricks into a wall. By noon, Nell, one of the few colleagues I trusted, called from her personal phone. Her voice was hushed, as though she'd stepped into a stairwell. Alice, it's chaos here. They're acting like you disappeared into thin air. Bryce tried to reassign your accounts to Karen, but IT flagged it. The system bounced him. I smiled into the silence. The rider, I said. Exactly. He lost it. Called IT useless, threatened to escalate. The chairman told him to keep it quiet. But word is spreading, let it spread, I said. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair. They were scrambling, already discovering the invisible walls I'd built years ago. They thought firing me had cleared the path, but every step forward was going to feel like running into glass. That evening, I met Priya at her office downtown. She handed me a folder with a neat stack of papers. Status memo, she said. Outlines the rider, client confirmations, and breach implications. If they try to touch a single account without you, we file immediately. I flipped through the pages, the legal language both clinical and strangely satisfying. They'll fight it, I said. Of course. They'll call you unreasonable, vindictive, say you're holding the company hostage. But contracts don't care about feelings. You gave them revenue. They gave you control. They signed it. We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the city outside muffled by glass. I thought of David, the old COO who had once told me, "In business, patience is louder than shouting." He'd retired years ago, long before the board grew arrogant, but his words lived in me. Walking home, I passed the tower where I had worked for nearly a decade. The lobby lights glowed warm against the rain, and silhouettes moved inside. I remembered the countless nights I'd stayed late there, fixing problems others had caused, polishing reports that would be presented under someone else's name. They had fired me to erase me. Instead, they had put me exactly where I needed to be, outside their walls, but still inside their system. When I reached my apartment, my phone buzzed again. A message from Nell. "They just told staff you were redundant. People are laughing in the break room. They think you'll be gone for good." I typed back, "Let them laugh. Monday is just beginning." I set my phone down and poured a glass of wine, watching the droplets of rain streak down the window. Somewhere in a polished boardroom, they were congratulating themselves on streamlining operations. They didn't know that the ink on their own signatures had already sealed their undoing. The truth was simple. They had fired me, but they couldn't touch what mattered most. My clients, my reputation, the trust built one late night and one solved crisis at a time. That wasn't theirs to take. It was mine to protect. And as I looked at the folder on my desk, paragraph 14C underlined, signatures crisp and clear, I felt no fear, only certainty. They thought the story had ended, but in reality, it had only just begun. By Tuesday morning, the whispers had turned into ripples. Nell texted before I'd even finished my coffee. Bryce lost it in the meeting. He tried to show the chairman new account plans, but finance refused to approve without your signature. He called you a ghost haunting the company. A ghost. I almost laughed. Ghosts vanish. I was everywhere, just invisible to them until I wanted otherwise. I spent the morning reviewing renewal schedules. 3 major contracts, worth more than half the quarterly forecast, were entering the 90-day window. Each one carried rider 14C. Without my approval, they couldn't renew, upsell, or even negotiate scope. If they tried, it would trigger material breach. I drafted polite notes to each client, thanking them for their partnership and confirming continuity of stewardship. No legal threats, just reassurance. By noon, my phone rang. The number was familiar. Anderson Medical, my largest client. "Is it true?" the CFO asked without introduction. "We heard you were terminated." The board sent someone else to our office yesterday. We told them to leave. I kept my voice steady. "Yes, the board voted to end my employment. But as you know, I remain your steward of record under the rider. There will be no changes without my authorization." A pause, then a sigh of relief. "Good. We don't want chaos. We trust you, Alice. Keep us posted after the call." I sat back in my chair. Trust. That was the currency the board had never understood. They thought contracts were cages. For me, they were bridges. By late afternoon, Nell called again. "They're furious." The chairman demanded IT unlock the renewal portals. Compliance refused. Said the system is tied to legal contracts and can't be overridden. Bryce shouted about finding loopholes, but the general counsel warned against it. "They're boxed in." "They boxed themselves in," I corrected. That night, I met Priya at a small cafe near her office. She looked as sharp as ever, legal pad balanced on her knees. "We need to decide when to go public," she said. "Right now, it's rumor inside the company. But once investors hear clients won't move without you, pressure multiplies." I stirred my tea slowly. "Not yet." David always told me, let them show their hand first. They're still underestimating me. That's my advantage. Priya nodded. Then be patient. But document everything. Screenshots, emails, call logs. If they claim you're interfering, we'll need proof it's stewardship, not sabotage. Walking home, I thought about Tom again. My ex had once mocked me for obsessing over details. You write contracts like you're preparing for a war that will never come, he'd said. He couldn't see that wars don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly in the form of a vote, a smirk across a table, and a security escort. At midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from Nell. A photo of Bryce standing outside the boardroom, face red, hands cutting the air. The caption read, "He's unraveling." I stared at the photo, then at the folder on my desk. Patience, I reminded myself. Let them twist. The next morning, Wednesday, I visited the modest office I'd rented downtown. A single desk, a filing cabinet, and a whiteboard. No prestige, but privacy. I pinned the renewal schedule to the board and circled the 3 major contracts. 90 days. That was my runway. If the board didn't reconcile with me before then, they would face a revenue collapse they couldn't explain away. At 10 a.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was a different client. Wexler Manufacturing. The operations director sounded irritated. Why are we hearing different stories? The board told us you're gone, but yesterday your email said you remain our steward. Both are true, I said calmly. They ended my employment. But under Rider 14C, I am still your account steward until your contract ends. That was the agreement they signed. Nothing changes without my written consent. Silence on the line, then a low laugh. So they fired you but kept you? That's rich. We'll stick with you, Alice. Don't worry. When I hung up, I let myself laugh too. Fired but kept. The irony was almost artful. That evening, Priya called again. They'll try to paint you as vindictive. Expect press leaks. Disgruntled ex-employee clinging to contracts. Don't react. Let the client speak for you. Their loyalty is your shield. I can handle being underestimated, I said. It's familiar ground. After we hung up, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere across town, the board was drafting memos, rehearsing strategies, convincing themselves they still held control. But control isn't in titles or board votes. It's in trust, in paper, in signatures that don't vanish because someone wants them to. I closed the folder and whispered into the quiet. You fired me to erase me. Instead, you locked yourself out. The first cracks had already appeared, and soon the whole facade would crumble. By Thursday morning, the board's confidence was starting to fray. I didn't need inside sources to know it. The evidence arrived in my inbox. A client forwarded me an email from Bryce himself. The subject line read, "Seamless transition." The body promised new leadership, renewed focus, and dedicated account support. It was written in the kind of corporate fluff that looks convincing until you read the fine print. At the bottom, in smaller font, was the real attempt. Please confirm authorization to transition your account steward. The client's note to me was short. We declined. Only you have our trust. I saved the message and smiled. They were moving from arrogance to desperation, and desperation always left fingerprints. By mid-morning, Nell called again. Her voice was sharp, like she'd been holding it in too long. Alice, it's bad here. They're fighting in every meeting. The chairman keeps insisting the rider can't possibly bind the company. Legal is panicking because the contracts are ironclad. Bryce shouted that you'd forged the signatures. IT proved they came from DocuSign with board approval. He stormed out. They're showing their hand, I said quietly. More than that. People are scared. Staff are whispering about clients pulling out. No one knows who to listen to. I thanked her and ended the call, my mind racing. Fear spreads faster than confidence. And once staff start doubting leadership, investors aren't far behind. That afternoon, Priya and I met in her office again. She slid a printed article across the table. The headline made me exhale through my nose. Former vice president allegedly blocks company operations with contract loophole. The article quoted an unnamed senior executive calling me unstable and vengeful. They're leaking to the press, Priya said flatly. This is strategy. They want to frame you before you go public? I read the piece twice, each word a small sting, but not enough to wound. It won't matter, I said. Clients know the truth. And investors don't care about gossip. They care about revenue. Priya leaned back in her chair. Still, perception matters. If this escalates, we'll need to show your restraint. No retaliatory statements. Let the documents and the client speak. I nodded, though anger simmered beneath my calm. They wanted me emotional, reactive, sloppy. They still didn't understand. I wasn't here to burn them down. I was here to hold them accountable. On my walk home, I passed the company tower again. Through the tall glass windows, I saw staff clustered in corners, eyes darting, whispers spreading like wildfire. I remembered standing in those same corners years ago, invisible, my work absorbed into someone else's credit. Now, they had tried to erase me with a vote, but all they'd done was turn my absence into the loudest voice in the building. That night, I opened my laptop and organized the growing evidence. Client confirmations, forwarded emails, screenshots of the board's contradictory statements. Each one was a brick, and together they formed a wall no accusation could break. At 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Bryce. His voice was low, falsely calm, but every word trembled with fury. Alice, be reasonable. This will ruin you. Come back tomorrow, we'll negotiate a soft landing. Don't push this further. I forwarded the recording to Priya. Her reply came minutes later. Preserve it. It proves pressure tactics. Don't respond. I poured a glass of wine and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had spent years dismissing me as background noise. Now, their entire empire was shaking because of a clause they'd signed to keep me happy. On Friday morning, the first real sign of collapse arrived. A message from Anderson Medical's CFO. The board contacted us again. We reminded them our contract is bound by Rider 14C. Unless you confirm, no action will be taken. We also informed our legal counsel. The moment I read the last line, I knew the game had changed. Clients weren't just loyal. They were mobilizing. The board wasn't up against me anymore. They were up against the very people who paid the bills. That afternoon, Priya called with a final note of clarity. They're running out of moves. Next week, we take it to investors. Quietly, professionally, with the paperwork in hand. You don't need to shout. You just need to show up. I closed my eyes for a moment, hearing David's words in my head. The old COO who had believed in me long before anyone else did. Patience is louder than shouting. The board had shouted themselves hoarse, and I was still silent, still steady. The cracks had widened. By next week, the whole structure would come down. Monday morning, the air felt different. The drizzle had cleared, leaving the streets sharp and bright, as if the city itself was waiting for something to unfold. I buttoned my navy jacket, slipped the folder of documents into my briefcase, and walked to the office tower I hadn't entered since the day they escorted me out. Security hesitated when I gave my name. I slid across an envelope on Priya's letterhead. Inside were instructions citing my authority as steward of record for every major client account, signed and witnessed. The guard scanned the pages, then handed me a visitor's badge without a word. I didn't need fanfare. Silence suited me. The boardroom looked exactly as I remembered it. Polished table, leather chairs, the skyline stretching behind glass. They were all there. The chairman, Bryce, the others, clustered in suits that looked more like armor now. When I walked in, their heads snapped up. What is she doing here? Bryce barked, already red. I set my briefcase down, calm and deliberate. I'm here as steward of record for every active client account, which means any discussion of operations, revenue, or renewals includes me. The chairman cleared his throat. His voice strained. Alice, as you know, your employment was terminated. This meeting is for leadership. I opened the folder and slid a stack of documents across the table. Client letters, confirmations, each one signed, dated, and bound by Writer 14C. Leadership? I said quietly. Clients don't follow titles. They follow contracts. And these are clear. Nothing moves without me. They leaned in, scanning the signatures. I watched the progression of their faces, confusion, disbelief, then the pale realization that they had trapped themselves. This is obstruction, Bryce snapped. You're holding the company hostage. No, I replied evenly. I'm protecting the clients who pay for your bonuses. You fired me. That was your choice. But firing me didn't erase the obligations you signed. The chairman tried to rally. Even if these riders are enforceable, investors won't tolerate this chaos. You're destabilizing the company. I let the words hang, then placed my phone face up on the table. A name flashed across the screen. Anderson Medical. I answered, my voice steady. Yes, I'm in the boardroom now. Of course, I'll ensure continuity. We'll move forward once agreements are honored. When I ended the call, the silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Investors already know, I said softly. They don't want excuses. They want stability, and stability requires respecting the contracts that keep the revenue flowing. For the next hour, they scrambled, arguing technicalities, muttering about litigation, trying to paint me as unreasonable. I answered each calmly, citing the clause, the signatures, the confirmations. Every protest only underscored how little ground they had left. Finally, I stood, gathering my papers. Gentlemen, I'll give you until Friday to adjust. Either acknowledge my authority as steward of record, or I'll move discussions directly to investors. You know as well as I do what that would mean for your seats at this table. Without waiting for a response, I left the room. The hallway was lined with staff pretending not to listen, their eyes flicking toward me with something between curiosity and relief. I offered a small, calm smile as I passed. Power doesn't need volume. It needs presence. By Tuesday afternoon, the first cracks became collapses. The company secretary circulated a memo acknowledging my stewardship. By Wednesday, 3 directors had resigned for personal reasons. And by Thursday, investors issued a statement. We support continuity of stewardship and look forward to renewed focus under Alice's leadership. Bryce tried one last time. He cornered me outside the elevator, his voice low and bitter. You think this is a victory? You'll drown in responsibility. You don't know what it's like to carry it. I met his glare without flinching. You're right. Responsibility is heavy. That's why you kept dropping it. I won't. On Friday morning, I walked into the boardroom again. This time to silence, no protests, no smirks. I took the head seat, opened my notebook, and began. The company belongs to its clients, its employees, and its shareholders, not to egos. That ends today. I outlined the plan. Freeze non-essential spending, audit renewals, shift bonuses to gross margin, establish an independent audit chair. No grand speeches, just actions. They listened because they had no choice. That evening, back in my small office downtown, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked at the stack of contracts on my desk. They weren't weapons. They were promises. Promises to clients who trusted me, to staff who deserved better, and to myself. That I would never again let others decide my worth. Revenge had never been the goal. The goal was respect, accountability, justice. And justice, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives quietly, steady and unshaken, written in ink years before anyone knew it would matter. The board had underestimated me. They thought I was finished. But in the end, all they had done was hand me control. And this time, it would be on my terms.